Well, let's talk about something. I mean, that's also dark, but inspiring at the same time. In the United Kingdom, there
Yeah.
have been these prolonged strikes. Another action happened today with the RMT, which is fighting against really severe austerity. Effectively pay cuts because they're not reaching they're not matching inflation in the economy. And just a couple things just to like catch everybody up before we go to some of these clips. Um, so there were more actions today. Um, only 1 in 5 trains are running around half of the network. Some lines closed completely. And this is quoting from The Guardian. And more strikes are planned for Saturday and next month. The Transport Secretary, Tory Grant Shapps, threatened to ban strikes by different unions in the same workplace within a set period and ensure critical industries such as rail maintained minimum service levels. So this is not just one random call from the Tory party. We're seeing it from many, many folks, including people who are very likely to potentially take on leadership of the party from Boris Johnson. So what's going on right now is there's this prolonged labor struggle, and the government itself is now threatening to make one of the basic rights of a democracy, the right to engage in strike action when you are not being heard by your employer. They're trying to find ways to effectively make that illegal. So things are dialing up there in this fight, and I think it's really important to note some of the conditions there. So those are the actions from today. But this is another piece in the Guardian, sort of in response, some of the response that we're seeing to these calls. So this is in the Guardian today. Unions issue threat of United Kingdom general strike as rail crisis grows. And this is from today. Unions warned that the United Kingdom could face a general strike this year as rail workers voted for fresh action to intensify as summer of industrial unrest. The vote for further transport strikes came as Keir Starmer, we got some words for him in a second, sacked Shadow Transport Minister Sam Terry, who conducted a broadcast interview alongside striking RMT workers at the Euston station, a move that is likely to increase divisions between
Hmm.
labor and trade unions. Just an incredible sentence right there. Move that is likely to increase divisions between the Labour Party and trade unions. Other shadow ministers are expected to escape serious sanction, but Terry was told by Labour whips he had broken collective responsibility by making statements about pay and inflation that are not party policy. We're talking about this more in depth in a second, but just absolute carcass joke of a fucking party, the Labour Party under Keir Starmer right now. Um, as much of Britain's rail network ground to a halt, the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union chief, Mick Lynch, called for a general strike in retaliation to ministers' threats to curb industrial action, warning of the biggest resistance mounted by the entire trade union movement. Travel was disrupted for millions on Wednesday as some lines closed. Only about 1 in 5 trains ran on about half the network, as a fourth day of pickets this summer affected the networks in England, Scotland, and Wales. So this is only getting much more serious, and that call from Mick Lynch is a serious one. And I think we've been seeing this kind of percolating for a while, of other unions sort of showing support and solidarity with the RMT. Many people starting to show up and support, just lay people, everyday citizens, for this action, despite the onslaught from not only the Tory party, but also the Labour Party against this very, very justified and correct action that we're seeing.
Yeah, and no offense to folks who call for a general strike, on Twitter in regards to something. I think it is the correct people are identifying the correct cure. The What I will say though is that coming from labor leaders is that's when you're starting to cook. And
This
because
one is serious.
I remember going back to like Occupy. It's like, oh, we need a general strike. It's like, okay, how do we what who could possibly start that up? Is it just going to be different people that get on at that point, like Democracy Now or MSNBC? Like, no, it's going to have to come from labor leaders.
Yeah, and like I'm sorry. It's like the same thing as saying like we need a revolution. It's like fine, it's just like that's not moving the ball forward in any kind of material way. This kind of work is what moves the ball forward. Like everybody knows the tactics, right? Strike action, protest, etc. like that's not a mystery to anybody. It's like the ability and the capacity to do it, and they've been building that up. And I mean, we'll get to a few different things in the segment, but I want to say to our friends in the United States, well, I'm talking like I'm a foreigner, to other Americans, like this is like the kind of playbook that you should be looking at. Like, what happens with the Labor Party? The Labor
Mhm.
Party betrays working people in the United Kingdom. They won the coup against Corbyn, but also the significant refusal of that party to recognize the hurt and the calls from people in that society, particularly in the industrial sectors of the United Kingdom economy. When labor unions, for example, were saying we need to get away from institutions that are against our interests, like the European Union, you saw the Labor Party make a very, very similar gambit. Like the Democratic Party did in the United States, was they said, you know what, we're going to say fuck you to all of the working people, and we're going to instead turn to more comfortable cosmopolitan folks in London. And that's the kind of nonsense that you saw with the demands to nullify a Democratic vote in that country and call for a second referendum, which was not the only thing that tanked Corbyn, but that was an undermining policy from the Labour Party to Corbyn that basically made the Labour Party appear very, very clearly to folks to be an organization that was extremely hostile to the interests of labor and workers and their voices. And that only becomes embodied in its purest form by slimy, or what do you call him, spineless Starmer in the United Kingdom. I think before we get to Starmer, though, I did want to like focus on some of the hits um, from some of the media hits from Lynch. We played Lynch earlier in the show talking about inflation and how it's amazing how they always talk about wages and they never talk about profits. But this is another clip here of Eddie Dempsey, who's another spokesman for the RMT. And I just want people to watch this because it is in the same way that Mick Lynch is so great and clear when he goes on these spots. This is a really incredible example of going on into hostile territory and just hitting your notes, because they try to trap him on 3 or 4 different things throughout this clip, and every single one he responds immediately and sort of knocks down their kind of straw man arguments in their attempts to try to derail this conversation.
You wanted a pay rise. You've got that. The pay rise you've been offered.
Got a pay rise. It's a real terms pay cut.
Offered is more than what nurses are getting. It's more than 3%.
Nurses deserve far more than what they're getting.
So just wanted to note right there, like that's absolutely perfect, right? Trying to derail it because they've been doing this time and time again, is saying like, well, let's find another group in society that you should care about, and you should care about the state of affairs for workers in the United Kingdom, as you should in any society. And they're trying to say, what if we pit the railway workers against the nurses? And we make it a choice between, do you like nurses more? Do you like railway workers more? And he says, absolutely not. Like, we stand in solidarity with nurses and they deserve more, right? It just like, this is the kind of tactics that they use in the media to try to distract and create false lines of division amongst the working class. And like, this is a great example of somebody just refusing to play ball with that shit.
Bonuses worth hundreds of pounds.
No,
not good enough.
They have to cut 400 million out of their operational expenditure, thanks to Grant Shapps. So they're slashing 1/3 of the entire maintenance frontline workforce. They're cutting maintenance schedules in half. This is the infrastructure you'll be travelling on. That's what they're doing to slash money out. And they want us to accept that. And if we do that, as a reward, they're going to offer us a real terms pay cut. That is not acceptable. If workers' wages are not keeping up with inflation, they are going to be made poorer. That is not a pay rise. That is a pay cut. We're not going to have it.
Workers' pay rises cannot keep up with inflation if you're not to have a wage price spiral. Well, you know that. It's got to be below inflation.
That's absolute rubbish. What's caused inflation is the shock of the supply chains from the global health emergency and rampant profits. 73% profits are up since 2019. Pay at the top is going through the roof.
Nobody's arguing that. What I'm
no
saying
one's worried about pay at the top, Anne.
You cannot match inflation with pay. I've just explained, because then you get into the wage price spiral. Then you get into the wage price
But people at the top are all right. Their profits can carry on going through the roof. For 30 years in this country, wages have not kept up with inflation. At the same time, profits have rarely not exceeded inflation.
You tell me.
There has been a transfer of wealth from working class people to people at the top, and that can't carry on. That has got to change.
I mean, That's rubbish, I think is the correct response to that kind of argument. And look, there's no answer. There's no answer to the question about profits and those at the top, because that's what this whole conversation is designed to obscure, right? They try to make it seem abstract, like, oh, well, that's just something that happens. That's a natural process, not something that is planned. And the fact that the Tory party and the Labour Party, frankly, are so aligned against the interest of trade unionists here, I think also really exposes a fundamental reality of the nature of the capitalist state, which is that they are set up to protect the long-term interests of capital, right? At the end of the day, is a wage increase for those railway workers like the death knell of capitalist production, or of like capitalist power in society? No. Why are they fighting so hard against it? Because they know that if the railway workers get a wage increase at the expense of profits at the top, then that will come into other industries. And they want to make it seem like it's a hard law of economics that you cannot have living wages for workers and have functional systems, which is an absolute lie. And it's a testament to how successful this movement has been, that they are able to go on time and time again and shut down these tired, limping arguments that are allowed to parade themselves for so long as detached scientific analysis.
I mean, that was exceptional. I don't know what more to say about that. Like, and like you said, they only have that one response, which is like, this will necessarily, if you give people raises, it'll necessarily lead to inflation. And they literally don't have anything to say to like, okay, we're just going to let like rich people continue to get massively, massively richer and buy up like anything like productive and useful in society as people get immiserated. And that's what they're there to. That's their function in media, is to protect that. And it is like what's that? Is it John Carpenter with the glasses? It's like all of a sudden somebody's saying the thing that like the subtext, and you just hope that it's we can get it out there enough, I guess.
So, as we said earlier in the program, the Labour Party has been in turmoil, not just in terms of polling and their weakness and their limpness as a party, but also because Keir Starmer has told, we talked about this on the program earlier, like a few episodes ago when we first started covering this, he has told members of the Labour Party that they cannot take a firm position in support of trade unionists in one of the largest industrial actions that we've seen in our lifetime. Right, which just shows how dead that party and that organization is. And today, as we noted earlier, they fired the shadow transportation secretary Grant Shapps for showing support to the RMT. So that's the current state of play for the Labour Party. But the difference here, and this is like the point, other than us just trying to show solidarity and cover this, the difference here between what's happening in the United Kingdom right now and is what's happening with the U.S. left is there is the correct analysis on both sides, right? The major kind of nominally left party, the party that people assume stands up for workers, even though the history of both of those parties shows that it really hasn't, is betraying us. So in the U.S., we criticize them, rightfully so. In the United Kingdom, you have seen this upsurge in trade unionists saying, we're no longer going to support the bottom line of the Labour Party. We're not donating money. We're not showing up for them. They don't show up for us. And we're seeing it through the RMT. We also saw it with Unite the Union when they elected Sharon Graham, who has been taking an exceptionally powerful stance against the Labour Party, saying, if y'all don't stand up for workers, why should workers show up for you? But instead of just sort of sitting back and saying, we're not participating in like society or in politics in like the grander sense, they've taken it much more directly and said, we're going to fight with each other and we're going to build up a strong working class movement in the society that has gotten to such a point where you have Mick Lynch making credible threats of a general strike in the United Kingdom because of the mismanagement and the threats that are coming from the Tory party. I just bring this up because, sometimes when we talk about the problems with the Democratic Party, I remember this like very vividly, especially when I first started working on TMBS. People were like, well, yeah, it's fine. You don't want to support them. Well, of course, we'll go to protest with you, right? Which is a very flat view of what political action is, right? It's either voting for those guys or, showing up at a protest and you take a picture and you go home. No, there are ways to engage in politics that have material benefits and express material threats to those in power that is separate from just saying we're going to create, a voting bloc, etc. I think there's a use for, voting and participating in democracy on that level. But this is the example when we talk about working class politics, is recognizing that this false sphere of politics that is taught to us in this country, and particularly like through liberalism, like big liberalism as like a political philosophy, where it's every couple of years you show up and you pick a name and that's like you participating in democracy. No, the Marxist socialist argument says politics touches all of these facets of our lives, most importantly the workforce, where they say that it is not part of politics. And this is an example of bringing politics into the daily lives of the membership of those unions, into the general public here, and actually building up real strong independent working class power. That I think is a very useful example for us to be learning from. Now, there are different contexts here. A lot of the unions in the United Kingdom have traditionally been more radical than American unions, right? We are in a period of retreat in this country. So it's not a model that we can just import, sloppily one for one. But when you're trying to imagine and conceptualize what that looks like, this is an example of something stirring that we should not only be supporting, but saying, how can we learn from some of these movements here to be getting better results for working people? Because the fact is that, again, in the same way that the Bernie Sanders movement was so worthwhile and beneficial, the Corbyn movement was as well, right? I think that was an incredible use of people's time. It came really close, to maybe being successful, arguably maybe even closer than the Bernie Sanders movement ever did. But in the absence of that kind of vehicle, and in the reality of seeing how just decrepit the Labor Party was, how strong that organization, like the Labor Party can't do shit, but they can take the whip away from Jeremy Corbyn, right? They can
and salt the earth. Yeah.
What?
And salt the earth for like anybody trying to run that program again.
100%. But like, and what a lot of people have when they face that kind of defeat is, oh, we're going to depoliticize. I'm just going to try to live my life. What we're seeing here is people saying, we're going to take the shit into our own hands. And like, that is the kind of model, because I maybe I'm rambling, but like the point that I'm trying to get here is that like, people sometimes have a flat view of politics, that like the only way to engage in politics is inter-party struggles and then maybe at the ballot box, every couple of years. Right. And this is an example of how that avenue is always open. It's open enough that these guys don't have elected national positions, right, in the sense of like they're elected officials of government. These are elected officials within their union, within the working class as a whole, who are going up and saying, we're going to flex our muscle, and they have to listen to us. Right. Now, what they're trying to do right now is negative, right? What the Tories are trying to do is outlaw strikes, frankly, right? But they're having to play ball. That's an engagement. That's political conflict. And those are the kind of terms in the arena that you got to be thinking about if you're serious about changing this thing. Because hoping that the Democratic Party one day is going to wake up and start fighting for people is a pipe dream at this point. Finding interventions that are beneficial is worthwhile, but also recognizing that there are also other avenues that can be very successful is also absolutely crucial. And I think a lot of Americans need to learn that quickly.
And like you said, like it doesn't say that like voting is pointless. It's just like that really voting is to widen the berth, or to make a more hospitable political environment for if all of a sudden we get an American McLynch, right? Like if we start talking about that stuff here, it's right. The politicians, like you're franchised. If you can make it that day, you should do it. And particularly if you got somebody on DSA or an independent socialist running, you should go help those out, or even a progressive, whatever, right? Or, if you got all Democrats, like I voted for just absolute trash in North Dakota, just against like John Hoeven and shit. Right. But like that's not the game. It's not. That's like the refs for the game. Right. And you can try to get, and that's it's a way that can lead to a little bit less disappointment, I think, and a little bit more understanding of what's going to be the prime motive force if we do see progress.
If you have those 2 bits I sent you in the chat handy, like I do want to take a quick.
So here's the Liverpool one first.
Yeah, let's do this. And remember, for people who've been watching the whole episode, at the very beginning, we played that Mick Lynch bit to open up the show. And he was talking about how Starmer had a visit to Liverpool where barely anybody showed up. We'll break down some of the things that he said there, but this is an interaction that he had, I think, following or maybe right before his visit here. And yeah, if we could pull up the caption. Oh, the captions is fine if you don't worry about it. The caption of this, whoever shared it had a good caption. It says "Scow's Queen destroys Starmer," which I just I love as an editorial. But yeah, let's play this for a second because this is what this guy is facing, and I think it's good that people are bringing it to his face.
Can I just say that I don't know how you've got the guts to come to this city after you have been being interviewed and doing a column for the Sun newspaper, after the way we as a city were abused, and after the way we as a city, the Hillsborough victims were abused by that paper, and you've come here. Secondly, you lied to us about uniting the party. I'm still a Labour Party member. And you've expelled and witch-hunted in the most vicious way I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I've been a member of the Labour Party for a long, long time. You have absolutely said you had 10 pledges, you were going to carry on the Corbyn legacy. And ever since, you've done nothing but distance yourself from the ideas which tens of thousands of people joined the Labour Party to support. And all you've done is feed into the Tory ideology of not supporting strikes, of carrying on with the privatisation of our health service. You're doing everything to feed into a Tory victory. Because we may as well have a Tory if we have a person like you who lies to the party. It's dishonesty.
Thank you very much.
And our health service is going right down the pan. And you have a big responsibility, the working class people of this country.
Can you move back, please?
Excuse me. You're just, don't be getting physical.
No, I'm not touching you. Can you move back then, please?
You're touching my breast.
Can you move back, please?
Now move back.
No, can you move
I want
back,
to go
please?
to the toilet.
Toilet's over that way.
Absolute queen there, and like that's how Keir Starmer should be treated every time he goes out in public.
Yes.
And what you said there was right. Is like, I know it might sound a little bit hyperbole, but what you said is like, I'd rather have a Tory in office than somebody like you. And the fact is if you look at what Keir Starmer has done since he's taken over leadership of the Labour Party, he has done nothing except try to make it very clear to Capital that the Labour Party is very serious about protecting their interests, and has been a very, very happy junior member of the Tory government. And they are connected deeply at this point. You don't need to look much further than how they have been basically refusing to stand in support with this extremely popular working class movement, demanding dignity at fucking work, something that the Labour Party was founded to deliver political voice for people to do.
I mean, they're corrupt individuals, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the Labour Party seems lousy with them now, and that is my impression, that they have. There was such this energy, like what was it, 4 or 5 years ago, and all it's been since is witch hunting people out of the party, and I don't, and the smears of Jeremy Corbyn for being anti-Semitic, like, I mean,
just lies at the end of the day.
And we're still in this, like, apparently in this, like, glacial, like, frozen in time moment where we don't act like we all know that's what happened, and don't know that's the only reason Keir Starmer's there. Like, what else is he there for but to just foreclose that? Well,
he's there to inspire the people, and if we have this, this is his. So he was in Liverpool to deliver a keynote speech on the economy, which, at the end of the day, other than a couple of flourishes, is indecipherable. And in actual, like, material level is frankly indistinguishable from maybe, like, a more moderate wing of the Tory party. But I need Matt. Matt spent some time in the United Kingdom, so maybe he can help me understand these terms. Okay. Because I'm at a loss to understand what these 5 principles of a Labour government would be.
Okay, so I'll read these. Starmer sets out 5 economic principles of a Labour government. Interesting. Okay, I can't wait to dig in. First, financially responsible. Well, I'm already out.
We all know what that is. I'll bring austerity with a nicer face than the Tories will.
Oh my God. Yeah, that doesn't mean all of these fat cats who have been soaking up all your productivity for the last 20 years. We're going to take that back and spread through society. No, distinctively British. Honestly, like, I'm a very big fan of British culture, from Peter Cook up to like, I mean, Spice Girls are fine. But I don't know what that means. I don't know, even, like, I can't even Rorschach it, what that could possibly mean.
Colonialist, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Distinctively British economic principles. What are you, like, gunboat diplomacy? Like, good luck, guys. I mean, take back the Suez Canal.
So there's nothing clear except for this third one, which I
Partnership
think
with
is a very
business.
telling reality about the Labour Party.
Right. They're going to re-energize communities.
And also, for people listening, the third one is partnership with business.
Oh yeah, partnership with business. That's exciting.
And re-energize communities. I mean, actually, out of all these, that's something that he's done, because as you saw from that Liverpool woman just a second ago to the RMT strikes, they have certainly re-energized communities.
And then invest to boost productivity. I honestly, this makes me want to faint. How insane this is! This is his principles. Well, this is the home of the English language, and this flies. This is what the state of the art in politics is. Invest to boost productivity. I mean, it's like I'm talking to an IBM robot or something.
100%. So there's no answers there, no answers at all from Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. But luckily, we're not in the darkness. There is a vibrant working class movement that's worth supporting, and I hope that they get a victory very soon. And it's incredibly encouraging, as the Labour Party has tried to do everything to silence working class voices over the past few years, despite all of Corbyn's and many of the people who joined the Labour Party to try to democratize and make that a party for workers. Despite all of their efforts, the powers in the Labour Party have tried to do everything to stifle and silence working people, and that started long before these strikes began. But I'm really happy that workers aren't just sort of sitting around and waiting for a more jovial and friendly Labour Party, and are rather taking the fight into their own hands.